We're recording now. On Thursday, we talked an awful lot about character development, the character development program, its philosophy. And throughout the chat room sessions, a lot of folks were asking, well, what about the seniors? What about the seniors? Well, right now, it's my privilege to introduce Chaplain Nancy Smalley, our Southwest Region Chaplain, who had the privilege to serve on the National Task Force to answer that question, what about the seniors? Chaplain Smalley, thanks so very much, ma'am, for appearing at our joint Chaplain Corps Regional Staff College. The gavel is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. This is our Chaplain College was supposed to be in May, and of course it got canceled because of the COVID-19 issue, and this was a wonderful way to combine a bunch of regions together and solve some problems. I first want to start by saying I'm going to be talking about the Pamphlet 80-3, which it's and when they were in the process of naming this pamphlet, it's gone through all sorts of iterations. It's when I first joined Civil Air Patrol in the late 80s, they talked about ethics for leadership, and there was a lot of issues about ethics, using the word ethics in this title. So they agreed about applying core values for senior members. But part of what we're looking at is how did we develop an understanding of how our behavior and our values affect our decision making. And it's one of the things that, and I will have to say, I did not develop this pamphlet. I know that Chaplain Bowder from Arizona was on the original task group that did. I just got handed to me in the middle of all of this changes with professional development and say, how can we incorporate this pamphlet and this process into training our senior members? And I know for myself, teaching character development to cadets, that lots of times I'll have a parent or another senior member sitting in the back of the room, and they want to get involved and they want to answer the questions, and I have to remind them that that's a cadet-run program, but we'll talk about it afterwards. So I hope that people will find a way to encourage their commanders to implement some use of this program. And so what it is, it's and first let me back up and say, Civil Air Patrol didn't have core values since 1941. Our core values were developed in the again in the late 90s. In 1999, they decided on these 4 core values, and they kind of patterned themselves after the Air Force. They're very similar to the Air Force, although we have added respect as part of our 4 values, core values, and they have 3. So integrity, excellence. Theirs is excellence in all they do. Theirs is service before self, and ours is volunteer service, and then of course respect. So, and one of the things about having core values is one of the things I say all the time about being a chaplain is that I'm a Christian chaplain. Not everybody in my squadron or the region is a Christian. Not everybody is the same kind of Christian, the denomination I'm in. So how do we talk to each other and agree on some terminology that we all can work with? And so the core values is the perfect entity to do that. Everybody has some understanding of what integrity and respect and volunteer service and excellence is about. And so we can work with those things to develop a common process to help people understand how to make decisions. And one of the things that I know that I have problems with as a region chaplain, and I'm pretty sure my region commander does too, is that a lot of issues come up in squadrons that should have been handled at the squadron level. And so this process, I'm hoping, will give commanders and supervisors a way to think through how to make decisions about problems that are coming up. I used to actually, I've enjoyed when we were doing with the cadets, when we're talking about facts and assumptions and coming up with, it was problem, and then they changed it to something else, which I never remembered what it was, and solutions, that we somehow had the ability to give people a process to think. And I know, I hear my husband all the time, who's an attorney, saying to his potential client, just give me the facts, just give me the facts, because lots of times our assumptions and our point of view gets involved in how we make decisions. So, and Civil Air Patrol decided that there were kind of three ways that we would integrate an understanding of the core values. And one is what they call the schoolhouse weave. And I know that anybody who's taught anything in the Civil Air Patrol probably has heard that term. We use it in cadet programs, we use it in leadership classes. And basically what that is that we ask for the core values should just be involved and integrated in everything we do. Tim, did we ever get the slides up? I don't see them. He's not on there. Okay. Well, then I'll just, okay, there we go. Can you go to the next slide? Okay. So there, so anyway, there's their three-pronged strategy. One is the schoolhouse weave, which was to integrate the core values into every course. And one of the things that was frustrating for me as a chaplain was that the core values are sort of our, you know, our material. We were supposed to be the experts in this particular material, and many times I would not get called, or chaplain would not get called to teach the core values, and other people were doing it. So one of the other things is that they put a lot of responsibility on the commanders to encourage the core values discussions. And that's, I know when talking to my chaplains that that's not happening. So the third thing they wanted to do was they wanted to have member involvement, and to somehow do some training where members have an opportunity to wrestle with this whole understanding of core values and how we make decisions. So if you can go to the next slide. So a program was developed, and I've got that old term of ethics for leadership up there, and it was a kind of two parts to to implementing. One was using case studies, and very similar again to what we were doing with the cadets, and we still use case studies in scenarios. Here's a scenario, and so what they did was they took all these case studies that are in this program are taken from actual IG complaints that came up to national that probably should never have been IG complaints in the first place. It should have been handled at the lowest level, but they came up there. And with that, they the case studies, they have a 6-step ethical decision-making process and the use of what they call the plus filter, which is basically how do we determine the validity of our decision making. So what makes it an ethical decision versus just a regular decision? So someone just said I tried to include the core values, and that's exactly what we're also doing, was looking at. One of the things when we're looking at these scenarios is what core value are we dealing with? We may be, maybe multiple ones. And again, it kind of goes back to how do we solve this problem if we don't know which core value we're dealing with. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. So they had some, and like I said, this is the background to this program. And if you download the pamphlet 80-3, you get all this information out of there. And this is where I got the information to begin with. So they had some aims. Senior members will use universal truths as a starting point. And again, we have to be careful about this universal truth. What because that's where our arguments come from. What I believe is true may not be necessarily what you believe is true. And we see that in our politics today. We see that dealing with the COVID-19, what's true, what's not true. And then senior members will learn to analyze the ethical components of a situation or problem. And I think this is one of the things that a lot of people haven't developed that tool or that skill set to say, how do I solve a problem? What skills do I need? If we, again, I look at my husband's clients who come in and they are so emotional that they cannot step outside of that emotion. And so you have to back them up and say, what do we need to do first to solve this problem? They will also develop their ability to identify the core issues affecting complex situations. In fact, most of our chaplains all have a master's degree of some sort. Many of us have have some kind of ethics and philosophy background because of having a master's degree in theology of some sort. And so we kind of have, we have wrestled with these questions, but not everybody has. So, and not everybody is at that level. So how do you bring that level back down to, the mass people in our Civil Air Patrol program who may never have taken a class on ethics? And then senior members will increase their personal expression and group interaction skills. So again, it's hard to do it on a situation like this where I'm talking to my screen and there's not any real feedback at the moment, except for every once in a while somebody puts a little note up there that I try to catch real quick as it's going through. But hopefully when we get back to having meetings where people can see each other, then you can have these small group interactions and they can discuss these things, and hopefully in a skillful way to keep people on the track of doing that. Can you go to the next slide, please? And then senior members will see the relevance of morals and ethics in all aspects of their public and private life. So just like we teach the cadets, is this a fact or this assumption? We're also doing that with our senior members. How does this, you take what you've learned in Civil Air Patrol and you can apply it to everything you do in life, and every decision that you make is how do I gather what I need to make those decisions? And then they'll have a mechanism and a process that will enable them to see changes in their values and perspectives resulting from maturity and experience. When I think about, my life, and I think that, when I was 16, I wanted to drive as fast as I wanted to, and it didn't matter what the rules of the road were. The only thing is that I was afraid of getting a ticket. And as I got older, I began to realize that, hey, I'm on the road with other people. And so we have the rules of the road because it's to protect everyone. So I'm going to drive, following the rules so that we can protect everybody. And then it may get to a point where I'm going to drive my car as fast as I can because the person in the car needs to get to the emergency room. I'm going to break the rules, not because I, blatantly are doing that, because I need to break that rule at that time, and I'll take the consequences of breaking that rule because there's a greater need other than that. So you can see how experience can change your view of a particular rule at the particular time. And then seniors will accept their responsibility to make moral and ethical choices. And that's another one of the big issues that we have today, is that people are not willing to take responsibility for their decisions and take the consequences of their decisions. So we want to make sure that they understand this, that part of the ethical training is that you are responsible as an adult. You're responsible for your decisions, and there are consequences. If you drive your car fast and you get stopped by a policeman, the consequence may be that you receive a ticket. And so those are things that go into making judgments about the decisions we make. So next. So why the case studies? I think we pretty much, those of us have been doing character development for our cadets, we see how well the scenarios work. Hopefully they're relevant. And sometimes you have to say, this isn't relevant to my group of cadets, and I have to change it. Same thing with senior members. And the relevancy comes from the fact that the scenarios that are given in these case studies are real things that have happened in Civil Air Patrol, decisions that have had to be made. It allows our senior members of all ages to work together. I know one of the things that we have worked on with our chaplains is, and in fact, it was part of the training that I just did for the volunteer university, is that our different age groups learn differently and use technology differently. And so, you may have to learn how to use a Zoom program, or you may have to learn how to text. You may have to learn how to use a product that you weren't going to use, or to understand that, these younger adults, they're sitting there on their phones and they're texting each other while you're giving your class. And that's okay. That's part of how they communicate with each other. And then it allows for compatible with the use of a guided discussion. So the case study can always direct back to the case study. And the burden of the learning and understanding is shifted to the students. It's no longer the responsibility of the instructor to make sure you learn to do this. You get out of it kind of what you put into it. And then it encourages behavior changes. So just reading some of, I don't know if some of you don't know, may or may not know who Brene Brown is, but she's doing a lot of stuff on leadership. And one of the things she talks about right now with the factions on both sides is that we need to lean in and talk to each other. And so these case studies give us an opportunity to hear somebody else's view of what may be going on. So next slide, please. And then it gives this pamphlet gives some suggestions on how to prepare yourself to teach the class, or to facilitate the class. So one of the things it says is that, know the 6 steps of the ethical decision. And one of the things that's really wonderful about the scenarios is that each one of them's on a separate page, and each one of them lists the 6 steps, and each one of them has the plus analysis. And so when you do your handout, it's right there. And so everybody has access to what is going on. And they want you to make sure that you refrain from lecturing. Just like I don't literally like what I'm doing here by just telling you, I like to interact with members of the Civil Air Patrol, and especially the adults, to get their ideas. What are they thinking? What are their views on these things, and how can we get those out? And again, it says provide a copy of the case study for everyone, and encourage everybody to participate. And again, there are ways that those of us who've been teaching a while, we begin to understand, there's ways to draw people in without, making sure that we're not embarrassing anybody or anything, but just, calling people in. What do you think of this? How would, with some open-ended questions. Next slide, please. So here's the 6 steps of ethical decision making. And I've the number 1, 3, and 6 are color blue because that is where we would interject the plus model, and we'll get to that next. So basically, the first thing is you would read the scenario and you define the problem. And so one of the things that they talk about is when you read it, what is the expectation? What is and what core value it may be dealing with there? What did you expect that this person would do or do not do? It's sort of like when you drive your car, the expectation is that you'll follow the rules of the road. And so if someone's not following the rules of the road, what are some of the other issues that may be involved in that? And then you're going to apply the plus model to that, and we'll get to that in a second. But and so you want to analyze the situation. You don't want to just rush to judgment. And again, you have to be, you know, part of your part of it is that you have to listen to, you know, what are the facts, and then am I making assumptions? We'll get into that too. So once you've identified the problem, then you come up with some solutions to that problem, some alternative solutions. And they encourage you to come up with a list of at least 5. Well, actually, they say a minimum of 3, but they're really looking for 5 because they don't want an either or, this or that. They really want you to think about what are some of the ways that we can solve this problem that we haven't really thought about. And then the third one is to evaluate and identify the alternatives and label them positive and negative. So you look again at the facts and assumptions. Again, I guess I'm talking about Brene Brown because I'm reading some of her books right now. But one of the things that she talks about is that if you don't know the facts who make up the story, and that's what she's talking about, is that we make assumptions when we make up the story. When we really don't know the facts, we try to understand what's going on. I know that recently there was one of the actresses in the Glee who went swimming with her son. Before they found her body, we all had these stories that we made up about it, and some of them were good stories, some of them were bad stories. But you know, we sometimes have to stop and say, wait a minute, what do we know, and what are our facts that we do know, and let's not put our assumptions in there, because our assumptions are built upon our values. So and again, you would apply the plus model to that, and then you make a decision. And they say the hardest thing in this model is for people to actually implement the decision. And I see this a lot with our commanders when they're dealing with a difficult situation in their squadrons, is that they'll actually go through this process of looking at what the problem is and what the issues are, but they will not implement the decision. And sometimes that's the hard part, you know, because it may be telling a senior member that you know, they're going to put them in 000, or maybe that they're telling them you can't say those things to cadets, or it may be that they have to confront an issue and behavior that they don't necessarily want to do. And so then the last one is to evaluate the decision. So and again, we use the plus model there. And so, you know, this is a typical steps at the decision making. So what makes it different for us to make it ethical? And that is the plus model. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. So what is the plus model? Well, it's a set of filters, and basically it's how we judge each one of those steps as we go along. So, and they use plus as their easy way to remember it. So P is the policy. Is it consistent with policies, procedures, and guidelines? And then L is legal. And so is it acceptable under our laws and our regulations? Policy, one thing, regulations, another thing. And then the U is universal. Does the action conform to the universal principles and values adopted by CAPP? And that's basically our core values. Does it meet the standard of our core values? And the S is does it satisfy my personal definition of what is right, good, and fair? And again, that piece right there is maybe the most difficult for us, because what I may think is good, right, and fair may not be what's good, right, and fair for you. We'll talk some more about that. So if you'll go to the next slide. So again, the filter works on those different steps. So the first one is the problem. Does the problem violate any of the plus considerations? So does it violate our policy? Does it violate our regulations? Does it violate the law? I mean, there's some that are very easy to um, understand, but it's like uh, one of the issues that we were dealing with, I dealt with many years ago, was we had pilots who were training cadets at a flight academy who were going out at night and drinking, and then coming back coming back later in the morning, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and then getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning to go be a CFI for cadets. Lots of issues there, but so what were the issues? And there were policy issues, and there were regulation issues, and there were legal issues, and just violating all sorts of things. And but looking at that problem, how were we going to solve that problem? So, but having that using the plus model gives you the validity to say this is a problem, and it's a problem because of these areas. And then so you come up with alternates to this decision, and then you look at the solution that you're going to check and say, okay, does it meet the policy? Does it meet the regulations? Does it meet our core values? Does it meet my own test of what's good, right, and true? And then the last one is, after you have implemented your decision, you look at, did it solve all of those problems, or did it create new ones? And lots of times there are new ones that are created. So next slide, please. Okay. Chaplain Jay Hughes, was our chief of chaplains, and his statement was, every decision is a core values decision. So if you keep that in mind as you're working on this, then you can develop this program and get people to start thinking and realize every decision I make is a core value decision. Every decision I make is an ethical decision. And how does that affect not only my CAPP life, but my life, in my family, in my community, in my church, wherever, have influence. Okay, next slide. All right, so thoughts, questions?
Well, ma'am, what's the first step? All of us are out here going, well, we have this great pamphlet. Now what do we do with this?
How do we? Well, one of the things that we worked on with professional development, and I have not seen any of the levels yet. And one of the things that we talked about in that was that the core values need to be implemented in every single level, which they're supposed to be done anyway. And that this program was an opportunity to do that. So that's one thing. The other next one is that as a CDI, I work with a cadet squadron, so our program is pretty set. But when I was in a composite squadron, there were weeks when we go, what are we going to do with the seniors this week? And what a great opportunity for a CDI or a chaplain to say, hey, how about, this is a leadership opportunity. One of the things that I have always said, if you work with cadets in the cadet program, you see the leadership material that they're getting. You see the training that they're getting. I have learned so much more about leadership than I ever did going to graduate school. And these kids have such wonderful experience with that. They walk out of this program with all sorts of leadership skills that a lot of our adults do not have. And what better way to give adults an opportunity? Hey, we're going to work on leadership, okay? And here's, you want to be a squadron commander, you have to go to the UCC. You want to be this, you have to go, SLS. You have to this, you have to go to CLC. I mean, those are all things that hopefully this program is going to be squished into, and you can get that opportunity at your own squadron.
Great. Chaplain Williams, anything from Moodle, sir?
One of them, yes. To reduce the possible preachiness or lecturing atmosphere, would you suggest a round or square chair and table setup that would increase a more corporate adult feel and less of a classroom perspective?
I always like in the round, or even small groups. Just like what we do with the cadets, where we have a presentation and then break up into small groups. The same thing can happen with once they know this process, then you can break up into small groups and have them work together, and then come back to the group and talk about what are some of the solutions that you came up, and what were some of the chaplains that I know that have beta tested this program have talked about how wonderful it was that the senior members got immediately into the regulations. It forced them into the regulations. Well, what about this? And they have different scenarios on all sorts of things. And quite frankly, I don't know why you couldn't use it for even problems you're trying to solve. Here's our scenario. How are we going to solve this problem? And how are we going to make a decision about it? So yeah, I think in the round, or like I said, small groups makes a much better possibility.
Okay, I'm going to agree with you on that one, by the way.
Oh, okay.
I always like to do things in the round rather than sage on the stage. Next question. 80-3 states that there is no set time required for conducting the core values briefing. It is a case study that will be discussed once a month for a minimum of 1 hour. Rather, the squadron commander is given flexibility as to when and what time allotment to provide for core values briefing. Problem. We have some squadron commanders that aren't supportive of CDI lessons with the cadets, much less for seniors. Given their flexibility, and I love that that's in quotes, found in 80-3, how are we as CDIs to get them to support the effort with our seniors? May we please have some teeth in 80-3 to support this vital mission? I would like to add, pamphlets give you no teeth whatsoever, unfortunately, but there needs to be something somewhere that says we have to do this. So that's where our teeth comes in. And I will pass that back over to you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Chief, our chief, are you there? Can you help us with this? Because this is I get this question often, and one is that I really encourage you to build that relationship with your commander. And the other piece of that is talk about that, hey, I need this for my program. I need this for, and I think that's one of the things that we have looked at is that is that someone has to actually present one of these or attend one of these as part of their levels that they're working on, or their specialties. So it's getting creative, and I realize that that some of these commanders aren't going to do that. I don't know the answer to that. I wish I did.
Nancy, I think you're right. This is Chaplain Murdoch. You're right in the fact that they are talking, and is my understanding that in the new volunteer university that the seniors are going to be working through some of these projects, and they'll be going back in, and the terminology I've heard them use is that the core values and the ethics for leadership and the whole aspect of the values are going to be baked into every leadership level, so they have to do something with one of the core values on every level as they move up their training in every career field.
Yeah.
That has been what I have been told. Now, with regard to the other aspects, until that happens, we just have the wonderful privilege of trying to develop relationships with those other senior members and the excuse me, and the members of our unit, so that we can say to them, hey, let's look at this topic, or let's think about this. And I understand that. I've walked through the whole idea with squadrons at time that have said, well, Chaplain, it's nice that you're here. And sometimes they think, well, values are for the cadets and all of that. And they don't think it's character for seniors is important. And yet it is. And so part of that is that we just have to sometimes be willing to speak up and say, well, you know, you wouldn't put a pilot in the air without training. You don't want them to just get up there and say, well, wonder what the value is of this piece of the equipment, you know.
Mhm.
So let's take a look at some other aspects of values. Be a little bit of creative, but I think the foundational aspect of it is we have developed a rapport, and they want to hear from us, and they see the value of having us there. And so that's really where all of it will start. And then as you develop the rapport, they will start asking you questions, and you can turn some of those questions into a discussion, and they'll be willing to do some of that.
I mean, I can even see it, you know, like I know there's some scenario, like the scenario I was talking to about the pilots is, you know, that being part of the pilot training. I once heard someone getting in a CAPP van, a young person, and I'll just blame it on the young person. And he said, let's drive it like you stole it. And I went, whoa, we're going to stop right here. I'm not driving with you. You're getting out of the van. So, and I mean that, you know, it was like, we're going to have a discussion right here, because this is not an ethical display of decisions. And so, you know, if you get an opportunity to put it out there and people discuss it, and you get to see what other, like for instance, other pilots have to say about an issue, then maybe you're less likely to be cavalier about Civil Air Patrol's assets and personnel. So again, I think it does come down to making that decision, making that relationship, and sometimes those relationships are hard to make. I've had commanders who could care less about chaplains as well, and I just make myself a noisy gong, you know.
And some of the aspects of making that relationship, there are times that you will have people in your squadron who really are ethical people, and they are wanting to see more ethics, and so you get them to ask you questions, and you work through that. You know, there's more than one way to do this, and maybe in the aspect of it, we pull the seniors together, and you're talking, and have one of those folk that you've already given a couple questions to earlier, especially if they're saying to you, why don't we talk about this, or what about that, or if there's an issue that comes up in your community, just start asking questions about that, and then as that discussion moves, you turn it around to your core values.
And like I say, there are a lot of parents and senior members who sit in on a character development lesson, and that's and they want to get involved, and it's a wonderful place too to say to them, hey, you know, we have a program for seniors. Let's put together a class, you know, or a time that we're going to meet and do this. And that way, like I said, I find that a lot of composite squadrons don't really have enough to do with their senior, unless they're teaching them how to fly, you know. and that there's opportunities to help them with leadership. There's lots of people who would like to have these skills. So, any other questions?
Yes, actually, we have another one.
Okay.
Many cadet squadrons have more than just 2 senior members present during cadet character development. While these lessons are more geared to cadet, the seniors sometimes with the cadets. Would this count for the seniors? Would the senior receive credit for participation?
They're really not supposed to participate. I mean, in other words, that's really a cadet level activity. You know, it's kind of one of these interesting things because I've worked a long time in cadet programs, and cadet program officers do a lot of stuff that they don't get credit for. I don't know why that is, but I'm very cautious about my senior members actually participating. You know, it's one thing to be there and maybe they throw in a viewpoint or something like that, but that is for cadets to feel comfortable enough to talk to cadets. So I don't know that that would count towards, you know, this future program that they're talking about.
Right. Okay, that's the only Moodle questions I have so far as I know. I bet Jessica has a whole bunch of stuff for you. Oh, wait a minute. There's one more on senior participation. Then I'll turn it over to Ms. Parsons. Would it make sense to the character training into promotion for seniors? Would it make sense to tie character training into promotion for seniors?
Well, I think that's one of the things that they're trying to do with the levels. You know, at least this is what we worked on. I have not seen the results of our work. The Southwest region was tasked with providing some kind of values, you know, core values training at every level, and they were all aware of this pamphlet. So, but I haven't seen the final. So that's kind of one of the things I'm going to do, you know, during the conference. I'm going to walk through the volunteer university and say, okay, what are we doing now? You know, how do we do core values with our senior members? What did you take from us, if anything? And I hope they took a lot from us. So.
Okay.
We have time for one more question from the.
Sorry, Tim.
Pick a good one, Jessica.
Oh, there's so many of them. One of the questions that does seem to come up quite a bit and is sort of correlates with the question that you just answered. Would it be beneficial to have the cadets and the seniors given the same case studies to show the different generational ideas? So different perspectives on the same broad topic.
I think that would be okay for some of our upper level cadets and our older cadets, especially the ones that are, you know, college age and stuff, because they and just because I'm thinking about some of the topics that we've had even in character development. My squadron I work with have 12 and 13-year-olds, and the topics aren't always appropriate for their age, or I have to manipulate it a little bit so that we don't have a bunch of giggling little 12-year-olds. But I have seen cadets, older cadets who, and here again, as long as the senior members are allowing them to have that opportunity to voice their opinions on some things, I think that's great. But when many times cadets are seen as, oh, you're just this kid over here, and you don't, you know, your opinion doesn't count. I've seen that a lot. So I would be very careful about which group you did that with.
Chaplain Smalley, thank you so very much. And Jessica, I'll ask that perhaps you gather together the questions and give Chaplain Smalley something to do for the next few days of answering all
thanks.
these, answering some of these questions out in our public forums.
I can do that.
And hopefully the whole purpose of this has been to show where things are coming from. So again, thank you, ma'am. Your last words you might have?
Hey, again, thankful for this opportunity. This is a wonderful, I get to see people that I never would see in my own region. And I'm thankful for the Chaplain Corps as it's developing, and I hope to see a lot more of this. So
Very
thank
good.
you.